So we're doing whatever we're doing. If you're here for the first time, you don't know what we're doing, go back to something else, click the link. So we start talking about, we're basically going, there's this Israel Hamas / Philistine war going on. We've said what's going to happen in the war. We said a lot of things. That is not opinion. It's based on not claims. It's based on facts. We said there's never ever going to be a two-state solution ever. It's not a possibility. So let's not stop being stupid and say there is, because it's just the most stupid idea in the world, quite frankly. We are starting to assess the actual claims that are pro-Palestinian about Palestinians and where they come from and their claim to the land. The previous year, we looked at the DNA of Philistines, because that's where the term Palestine comes from, and we talked about that and said the Palestinians don't come from the Philistines, they come from the Arabs, because the Philistines aren't the Arabs, they're a seafaring European people around the Greek islands. Hence the seafaring, you know. All this stuff adds up if you actually do it correctly. So where does the term Palestine come from? It's the first time we hear the term Palestine, and again, you got to remember in the last video we talked about transliterations. So Palestine is a transliteration of Philistine for the reasons we explained. We're not going to repeat that. So Palestine is first Palestine because the Romans, after they kicked the Jews out of the land in AD 130, name it Syria Palestina. So it's not Palestine. So, but again, you've got the same, we talked about the vowel consonants, the same consonants, and it's again a transliteration. So what we find actually is the Philistines wouldn't have even called themselves the Philistines, I don't think. There is not a load of written record of the Philistines, who they were, where they came from, what they did. There is just the biblical account, which is Philistines. Hence the name Philistine and Palestine is actually a Jewish term. So when you self-identify as a Palestinian, you're using Hebrew language. You're not using Arabic language. You're not using European language. You're using Hebrew, Jewish language. What does it actually mean to a Hebrew or Jew? It means invader / foreigner. So straight away, you've got a kind of weird thing that the people who want to self-identify as a particular group and they hate a certain people and want whatever done to a certain people, then the name they're using, they're self-identifying, comes from that people group, and it means to that people group invader or foreigner. So the claim that, it's just the most ironic of ironies, that the claims the Palestinians make on land, that they self-identify with the term Palestinian, whatever that means. Again, we said in the first video that they're free to do that, and we're quite happy for them to do that if it makes them happy. Great. Can have no problems with that. But then you've got the logical thing of like, this is our land. It's like, well, you call yourselves foreigners and invaders. Okay, that doesn't really make sense. And most Jews probably wouldn't even realise that. Religious Jews, I think, certainly would. So anyway, so why did the Romans call that area of land Syria Palestina? To smite the Jews is the kind of factual record. Again, I guess we could investigate this more. If you want to investigate it, well, go ahead and investigate it. Again, if you want to correct me, put it in the comments or whatever. Correct me, put where you come from. Just don't say you were wrong. You know, this is the promise of social media, which we'll cover at some point. You are wrong, you are blah, 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 I hate you, blah, 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 blah. Well, quite frankly, if I'm proved wrong, I want to know that I'm wrong. So can you put your sources, please? I just don't want argument. Some of the arguments these videos are going to be hilariously funny. So if you want to be hilariously funny, please comment, I guess. That's fine. That's your freedom. I'm not going to delete your comments. But anyway, let's not talk about comments. But I'm aware this might upset people, but it's not the upsetting. It's, well, is this true or not? But that to me would appear to be true, at least to a certain extent, to my knowledge. But it's ironic. So the people who are in that land, when the Jews rename it Syria, Palestina, won't self-identify as Palestinians at all. Mainly because there's so many different people groups. It's a big region, and the Romans renamed Syria Palestina. I mean, obviously it would be parts of Syria, parts of Lebanon, probably parts of Jordan, possibly parts of Egypt. We're going to go through all these maps later, by the way. We're just underlying the idea. Now, if you fast forward, so you have different people groups who are whoever. We will go through the historical record at some point. But the major people who have a major say on the land because they own the land, because they capture it, are the different caliphates. Guess what? They don't call it Palestine. You don't have any people who are self-identifying as Palestinians. You don't have a reckon of Palestinians in Palestine because it doesn't exist. Everyone's still an Arab. Fast forward, you get to the Ottoman Empire. Guess what? The Ottoman Empire don't call the area which the Palestinians call Palestine. They don't call the area the Israelites call Israel Palestine. There is no self-identifying Palestinian people in the record. What happened to the Ottoman Empire? Well, the Ottoman Empire they joined in to World War One. They were on the German side. The Germans lost World War One. Basically, they got defeated. All their lands got split up. We also had the Crusaders amongst the historical record. We have the what is known historically as the Eastern Orthodox Church, which was based out of Constantinople, which was called something that appears to have left my head at the moment. I could Google search it, but quite frankly, it's just a minor part. But they're basically Middle Eastern Christians in that time. Something Tyne, Constantin. Oh, let's just forget it. I'm not going to Google it. I might just Google it and talk. So the Ottoman Empire lost their land in the Middle East after the Second World War. Let's just stop this, it's pointless. We will cover that term, I forgot. Byzantine, it's suddenly come back. Byzantine Empire. So the Byzantine Empire are before all this. Again, they don't call Palestine, they don't call Israel, Palestine. It came back. So anyway, so that's interesting, isn't it? So you've got no people group of Palestinians in the historical record. No people group, even culturally calling themselves Palestinians in the historical record up to the First World War at all. So now you've got a really big problem, and we haven't actually discovered the really, really, really big problem in this self-identifying issue. So if you go back and you go, okay, well, let's find some Jewish historical leaders who claim to be leaders of the Jews and claim to be the king of Israel and claim this and claim that, claim that. Find plenty, okay? Palestinians, no one. Any famous Palestinians that did anything famous for the Palestinians, or even self-identified as Palestinians in the historical record up to now, none. You've got a big, massive problem on your claim, but actually the claim gets worse because of what happens next and the information we're basically scandalized, which is untrue. What do you call it when you... I'm really losing my words today, aren't I? It's too many videos discussing too much is my argument. What do you call the word where you're publishing information which is actually false? I can't remember the term, but it's kind of like, it's looking more like that in what we're being told today, and that's what's been broadcast as truth across the news, which is the problem. So to me, that's getting pretty scandalous already. So let's go back to our storyline of trying to find the history of the Palestinians in the Middle East, not even the land of Israel / Palestine. So what do you have? You have different people groups from different cultures, a real mix that are all politically under the control of different powers. Most of them, by ideology, Arabic ideology, which is Islam. So they're Muslims. They're not self-identifying Palestinians as Palestinians from a Islamic perspective. And then you've got an even bigger problem, because surely in this whole ideological warfare battle that we're now seeing on the news, seeing across the whole of society, including Western society, about who owns the land and who has the right to the lands, well, the Muslims have never had any qualms about not calling the Palestinians and calling their land Palestina, or whatever. And there's no effort by anyone, either the overlords of the Muslims or even the non-Muslims or the people in the land, to call it Palestine. There was nothing there. So we come to World War One. We're going to talk about World War II in a second, which is what I said too. We're early 20th century. So for 20 centuries, or actually 19 it would be, wouldn't it? Yeah, with nothing, just foreign people, namely the Romans, and that's it, calling the land Syria, Palestina, and the border. So we're left with loads of different people groups. Naturally, who are those people groups? Well, yes, they're mostly Arabs, but they're not self-identifying as Palestinians. And there's quite a lot of Jews, although there's quite a thing already going on between the Jews and the Arabs. Namely because the people that were persecuting the Jews, namely the Christians and the Catholics, now aren't persecuting the Jews. The people that persecute Jews are the Muslims. So that's basically when all the problems begin. Like, it all makes perfect sense of why certain things aren't true and why certain things are true and why you have those problems when certain things aren't true. It makes perfect sense. The historical record is factual, and the facts from the historical record make sense. That facts were being spun. Propaganda. We're being propagandized. That's what the phrase I was trying to think up. The facts are propaganda. They're actually not true. So being not true, then they're lies. So far, we haven't found in the discussion. Again, go deeper into it. Go and find out if you can. In the historical record, there is no Palestines. There is no Palestine. There is no Palestinians. And the place we find it, there is no Palestinians. The Palestinians are not Philistines. They're Arabs. So we have this mix of Jews who start fighting after. So what actually does happen? So you have various things going on in the Middle East. So the Ottoman Empire, which is now crushed, which becomes modern day Turkey in what is now Turkey, which used to be the head of the Ottoman Empire. There were so many empires there. That's a major player, Turkey, in the whole thing. Don't forget that. So you've got the Byzantine, you've got the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire split in two. That's what the prophecy in Daniel means, with the feet made of iron and made of clay. So it's got an eastern side, it's got a western side. So the eastern side, which is Turkey, Constantinople, Turkey, survives much longer than the Roman side in Rome, ironically. So you've got the Eastern Roman side, you've got the Byzantines, you've got the Ottomans, and you've got the modern nation Turkey. That is a power player throughout history. Anyway, so the Ottoman Empire owns a lot of the Middle East. It doesn't own everything in the Middle East. So you've now got a mixture of different people groups, namely Arabs, in the whole of the Middle East. The lands the Ottomans didn't have are older Arab people groups, like Saudi Arabia, for instance. But you have a whole bunch of lands that used to belong to the Ottoman Empire, which are now given to two countries, France and Britain. Those countries are what are nations that aren't in existence at the moment that also become nations. So in this whole history, you've got who owns what and what does this, and the whole argument against the Jewish state and the nation state of Israel is there was no one there and it wasn't called Israel. It was like they are occupiers. None of the nation states that existed after at the point World War I ended, that nation states in the Middle East that were part of the Ottoman Empire didn't exist as the nation states they exist now. So you've got the same fact. So these are Iran, Syria, Lebanon, and Israel, and Jordan. So quite a lot of the Middle East, that very northern/western side. Egypt doesn't exist. It's British as well, but it's not Ottoman. It kind of has its historical thing. It has its historical borders. And the Ottoman Empire, I think, actually stretched down, you'd have to check this, down into what we call Sinai. So that wasn't actually Egyptian. But none of what we think is what we think it is, like it was 100 years ago. It just didn't exist. Particularly that northern side, particularly the western side. So the fact that's thrown against Israel is like, well, that only was because of this, that is because of every other Arabic nation in the Middle East that was formerly part of the Ottoman Empire. So basically there's lots of deals and agreements between lots of different people. So the major thing to understand now is none of the land is as it is now. Again, we'll go through all this stuff. So there's an agreement between the French and the British to split up the northern parts, which then becomes Iraq and Syria. Lebanon was formed with the same agreements in the same sort of areas. There's an agreement to form Jordan. Jordan doesn't exist before World War One, so Jordan now exists. And then so now you've just got that area we call Israel/Palestine. Now, so if we backtrack a bit, so you've got basically a lot of European nations and the United Nations trying to work out what to do with this land. You've got a lot of different things going on. So one of the other crucial issues you've got is displacement of people. So that's always an argument thrown into the mix. It's like there are millions and millions and millions of people displaced after World War One and after World War Two. Why? Well, what do you think happens after World War? Lots of millions of people get displaced. So some of the issues are revolved around trying to resolve those issues, and then some of the issues after World War II are revolved around stopping displacement. Because what does displacement mean? It means refugees who have no home. So why are there so many Palestinian refugees? Because there are so many refugees anyway. Again, that's an argument that can be made. It's an argument that can be disputed. You need to properly look at it. But it is an argument that can't not be disputed. That's the thing I'm saying. Actually, what you realise up to now, none of the arguments that are made can be undisputed. They can all be disputed to various degrees, sometimes completely. So what happens? So you have that agreement. The Brits have Palestine/Israel, and they have Jordan. So the first thing that actually happens, so we have these maps of Palestinian land stolen now, which are so factually incorrect, it's like laughable that people would repost them, but they do. And that this would be the argument, because it's not, none of it really is factually correct. So the first map they leave out is the founding of the nation of Jordan. So let's forget the French thing, because the French do whatever they do. Let's highlight on the British thing. So the British Empire has certain lands in the Middle East, including the land of Israel/Palestine. So what does it do with it? It has in that land Arabs and Jews. So actually, the first thing it does, and this is never on the maps and should be if you want a factual presentation of what the British people did with the land and where the Palestinians settled in, is they were going, okay, these Arabs, again, no one's self-identifying as Palestinian at this point. So the whole Palestinian issue, why did the Brits do that? That was a bit stupid, because how do you make arrangements for a people group and settle a people group in a particular land when that people group don't exist? So there are no Palestinians claiming Palestinian identity. It only starts about now, but because it only starts about now, you don't have any major people groups. And if you took every major people groups into consideration, you would have 5 by 5 kilometre states across the Middle East, and probably 200 states, not a couple of dozen or so, between a dozen and 2 dozen, as we do now. And I'll say that wouldn't make sense. I need to do something. So that's the situation. Okay, we are going to finish the argument in the next, well, the train of thought in the next video.